So, as mentioned, the last time we talked about our survey, which we ran for SMEs in Ireland Together, and out of that survey, we came with some key messages, which led us into a second webinar, which is about mapping the customer journey. So we'd like to step through a few slides on that, but I'd like to start by going back with a little recap of the key messages from the survey that we had that led us to this point and led us into this particular discussion. So our survey, when we asked the SMEs in Ireland Together what their priorities were, we got a really, really high peak on increasing sales, and we got a really, really high peak on marketing and brand exposure, which was really, really interesting, but not actually very surprising. We would think that, SMEs would want to be increasing their sales and increasing their exposure to the market. But what we also found when we asked a question around customer experience, which is a little bit of a disconnect, we found that most organizations got a really low maturity score on this, and they were not mapping their customer journeys and not showing that they were working with their customer experience. So, when you put the two things together, it's a bit of a disconnect to think that, you want more sales and you want more exposure, but you're not clearly understanding your customer journeys, you're not mapping them, and you're not utilizing them to maximize your exposure and your awareness amongst your customers. So out of that, we thought, well, one of the things that came out of this was, well, obviously it's a priority to, discuss customer experience and customer journeys. And one of the things we want to do and share with the community was a little bit about mapping customer journeys, take a little bit of the mystery out of it, and a little bit of the mystery out of customer experience and what it is, and, have this webinar, record it, and get it out there to the wider community to look at in their own comfort at their own time. So that led us to the point of saying, well, let's have a conversation with everybody about what is customer experience. So, from my point of view, customer experience, a common enough phrase, the embodiment of your brands in the eyes of your customer. I found this really cool statement about it on HubSpot. And there's a nice blog, which I've actually put there, a link to in the presentation, which when you get the presentation, you can link into, or before if you like. But it's the impression you leave with your customer resulting in how they think of your brand across every stage of the customer journey. I thought it was a nice succinct statement. I had a few others from Salesforce and others, but I thought that was nice. And as it's HubSpot and as it's freely available, and we also go on to look at some of the templates they have freely available, it's a good reference point for us to use in Ireland Together as well. And then customer success. Really, customer success is about, proactively ensuring that your products and services help your customers achieve their business objectives. So what does that mean? It's really about the proactivity. It's about, I see customer success as a massive part of the customer experience where, you're making sure that what you're delivering to your customers is being utilized, but is being utilized to successfully help them achieve their objectives, not just as a sale. And customer success has gained a lot of traction in recent years, particularly in the B2B side of the house, where it's really, really important if you make a sale to a customer that they utilize what you sell them and that they get benefit from it, because if they don't, they won't advocate for your business, and they certainly won't, have further purchases, or you may just come to the end of a contract and they say, thanks, but no thanks, we've had enough. And one of the challenges I like to ask people when I talk to them about customer experience is, if you think of your last great experience as a customer, how did you feel about that? And who did you tell? So, we quite often have, good or great experiences as customers. We don't often talk about it. We don't often go and immediately say, oh, I must pick up the phone and tell somebody about that. Or the next time you're talking to somebody about it, say, do you know who was really great? We do, but not as often as we do the second piece, which is when you think about your last bad experience as a customer. How did that feel? And who did you tell? And I'm from a telecom background, and in telecoms we found that people who had a bad experience were 12 times more likely to talk about it than people who had a great experience. And that's significant, because one is a bad experience, not an awful experience, so anything below bad, and one is a great experience. So, to be way beyond the customer expectations, you might get a mention, but to just be bad, you were getting a mention, people were going to say, oh, don't go with them, it's a really bad experience. And I don't know if you guys have that experience, or if you've had that experience, or is that something that you would commonly have. But I would always say to people, when you think about customer experience, personalize it yourself, get into your own shoes of your own customer experience. That's the first starting point for making it very easy for you to then go and say, well, I want to know how my customer is behaving, or what customer experience I'm giving them. That's really, really vitally important. So, I mean, if anybody has any questions or wants to stop me, just go ahead. I'm very flexible in that regard. So why is customer experience so important? Well, it's really important now. I mean, the digital world just has shifted the balance of power to the customer. I mean, as customers, if you think about it ourselves, we have an increased choice. There are many options near and far. You can buy from far away. You can buy from close to you. You know, the corner shop is pretty much gone at this stage in terms of buying stuff. And if anything, the COVID-19 has shown the increase in online sales, how convenient it is to buy things. Another aspect of the convenience is we really now have, you know, what I term fingertip control. The advent of the smartphone 10 years ago and its, you know, proliferation just means that customers can get what they want when they want it, you know, so conveniently, you know, at the flick of a switch. And, you know, alongside that, you have some regulatory changes and some market changes where, you know, seamless switching is now the normal. So if you think of everything from your utilities through your telecoms, through your TV provider, you know, all of those people now provide seamless switching. And much of that is down to the fact that, you know, European regulations and generally regulations worldwide have moved towards promoting competition. And banking is heading in the same direction, as you can see, with things like PSD2. So your ability to influence your customers' experiences, the experience they have when they interface with your product and services, or that product itself, your processes and your people, supported by your systems. So whatever technology or IT you have that supports those processes and people. And they're the only things that you can actually, the only levers you have, you know, to help you with your customer's experience or to give the customers a great experience or even a good experience. And, you know, how you understand and improve your customer experience is by mapping and improving your customer journey. So you have to understand the journey that your customer takes to buy your product, to use your product, you know, to get service from you. Even billing is part of a customer journey, and particularly important where there's a service with a repetitive billing capability. All of those things are opportunities for you to have good service, good experience with the customers, but they're also opportunities for you to fall down and give the customer a bad experience. And as I said, the key thing here is customers talk about the bad things that happen way more than they talk about the good things that happen to them. So it's really, really important to understand the experience that you, as I say, I come from a telecoms background, so it's the experience you put your customer through rather than the experience you benefit your customer with. Quite often telecoms score quite low alongside some others like utilities on customer experience. Not really high up on the scale, although getting better, but I think banking kind of coming in behind at this stage in a lot of areas on customer experience. But what's really relevant is, you know, how your customers are experiencing your products and services. So, you know, when you measure it, I mean, what you're really looking for is advocacy. What you're looking for is customers who are loyal and stay with you, but also who promote you, like who, you know, actively tell other people, oh yeah, you know, I'm with them for years, they're great. You know, what I always tell people as well is be cautious around stories. You need to use data to measure your customer experience. And that data can come from many places, but you cannot use stories. If you're constantly dealing with the last bad story that has come into or the last complaint that has come into your organization, you're probably not fixing the underlying problems. And I've dealt with organizations where, you know, the CEO has a weekly discussion with the complaints manager, and every week the customer experience program is changed to chase after that last complaint, and they never achieve a solid customer experience because they're always trying to fix the unique, really bad complaint that's hit the CEO's desk rather than fixing the majority of their underlying problems. So I mean, things that you use to measure them, you know, customer advocacy, obviously, if you're using Net Promoter Score, and again, the key to that is always the promoter piece. NPS gets bandied around and people forget that what you're trying to do is use it to improve the promoters in your organization and move away from detractors. Customer satisfaction, so any customer satisfaction metrics you have, it should be there. Customer service metrics are really, really important as well. Understanding the basic customer service metrics, how long it takes you to fix a problem, you know, things like if you're in a business where call center is important, how long it takes to answer the phone can be really, really important as a feed into, you know, affecting your Net Promoter Score. Churn analysis, one that can be quite often overlooked, but remember, you're trying to have loyal customers. So it's really important that you understand with data why customers are leaving or what are the drivers of that. And the world of modern data analytics and artificial intelligence means you can get fantastic insights, but you really, really need to be going and getting them. And then any customer feedback or input, as long as it's structured and it can be made into data. So feedback, complaints, the level of complaints can often be a great indicator when something is going wrong. Customer surveys, customer market analysis, etc. But it's important as well that you measure across your customer journey, that you understand the different aspects of it. Like, for example, you could be looking at churn analysis and only focusing in on the last couple of months of a customer's lifetime with you. But the reality could be that the join journey is why they churned, because 2 years earlier they had a terrible join journey, and that set the tone for everything that they felt about your organization thereafter. And if you don't have the analysis that shows you those linkages, well then, you're not really, really going to be getting to the core of your problems. Any questions on that part? No? Okay. Good. So, customer journey mapping. So, I mean, essentially, you find a lot of mystery sometimes about customer journey mapping in organizations, and sometimes that's brought by people coming in to do it who really aren't professional about it. But quite simply, customer journey mapping is a tool that investigates, analyzes, and ultimately improves your customer's experience. I mean, what you want to do is you want to understand, as I say, in telecoms, sometimes it was the pain we were putting our customers through, but you want to understand the journey your customers make, the things that happen to them when they, order, when they, are billed, when they try to pay. And really the key thing about this is it is stepping into your customer's shoes to understand how your processes impact on their experience. So what is it about your processes that make the customer's life easy? And what is it about your processes that make the customer's life hard? And the real thing you're trying to do here is you're trying to make this easy for customers. So any customer journey that involves the customer making multiple contacts with your organization, you're actually now starting to annoy your customers. And I always kind of take a baseline view of, if a customer has to contact you 3 times to make something happen, you've probably lost. And certainly anything beyond that just becomes a real pain, and you're heading into dreadful experience. The end-to-end customer journey is typically broken down into really important sub-journeys. I've used one on the right there from Incognito. There's a nice graphic around discovery and purchase, billing, paying, using, customer service and retention. It's more skewed towards service, customer lifecycle or customer experience than it is towards the end-to-end journey of somebody who's just buying a product and walking out of the store with it. However, there'll still be some aspects of it that are significantly the same. But from my point of view, I've dealt with services a lot, and it's really interesting how, that, first bill or that payment process, if it's bad, is really one of the things that can throw a customer off. And, even though they're in contract for a couple of years, you can find that at the end of that, they just can't get away from you. Okay. So just a graphic then, just talking around the customer journey. There's lots of graphics. I just picked this one online because it raises the issue and the concept of touch points, both digital and physical. And again, it's aligned to the journey I just showed you, but it's talking about awareness and consideration to purchase, service, and loyalty. But what it is doing is it's talking about the different touch points, and the fact that you have physical touch points and digital touch points. So for example, you see on the purchase side there, you have your website. On the service side, you have your call center IVR as a physical touch point. And more customers are getting used to and moving towards digital touch points. And you do need to understand which touch points your customers are using, and how many customers are using which touch points, and if possible, what their preferences are. Because otherwise you can be fixing, something on the call center IVR where your real problem is that you don't have an appropriate mobile touch point for service that customers really want. And the challenge at the moment is that you kind of, in a lot of areas, need to have both, because customer preference for some things may be to call you, and for other things maybe to actually, when I don't want to talk to anybody at all. And then there's a generational gap thing as well, where older people tend to like to talk to a person, and younger people tend to not like to talk to a person at all. They tend to want to have a machine interface. So that's really, really important to kind of understand your touch points. I'll talk a little bit about that some more. And then in terms of customer success, really, if you look at this, the four headings on the right hand side, you're really looking for the customer to adopt, to retain and to expand the services they buy off you, and you really want them to give advocacy to you again. On the left hand side there, you'll see that in that kind of new customer buying process, the really important thing about customer success in there is that you're setting the expectations for the customer in that journey. And if you don't set those expectations right, well, you can try as hard as you like to have the right experience and the right loyalty as a result of it on the right hand side, but you won't get to it because the customer may have an expectation that's set too high. And in business to business sales, this is quite a common problem in that sometimes salespeople get a little overeager and they overstate the product or the services, meaning that when the customer gets into the customer success cycle on the right, they're doomed to failure. I've just thrown a link as well to the article that this is from there. It's worth having a read of that as well. And SuperOffice there, I found that quite interesting in terms of simplifying the story around customer success. There's a lot of stuff on the web about it. Okay. Okay. So one of the things that it is important to understand as well is about the differences between B2C, so business to consumer, and business to business. And I say this every time, I'm not so sure that all B2C customers are B2B customers are rational, but they tend to have a more rational view. You tend to be more emotionally engaged with your consumer customer than with your business customer. But from the point of view of some of the differences, B2B customers tend to be more features driven. B2C customers definitely looking for benefit, more impulsive, less impulsive on the B2B side, and a much longer decision making process, typically from business to business. Business to consumer tends to be much more straightforward and much quicker with a single decision maker, whereas on the business to business side, you normally don't get away with just one decision maker. You normally have to go through some sort of a process, or indeed have to deal with a lot of people to get to a conclusion on the decision. So some significant differences that need to be considered. So when you look at customer and customer experiences, you need to be aware of those differences. And we can talk a little bit about those, but we're going to try and break out into some workshops where we talk a little bit about the difference in the buying process and how that works for B2C versus B2B. So what we want to do is break out and have a look at some customer journey mapping. As I say, we want to look at the buying process. What I found online with HubSpot was that they had some customer journey maps, and they had 7 free customer journey map templates. So I thought that would be a good place to kind of touch in and rob something. So from that point of view, these are freely available, and the link is there in that article that I linked in the first couple of slides. So I've just taken a HubSpot template that they have there and just looked at it in terms of looking at that generic journey that I showed you earlier about, at a high level, if you wanted to understand what your customer is thinking and feeling, what their action is, what touch points they're using, and then, what do we want to change about this step, and how and or why will we make this change. So, quite simply, you could take this and adjust it to your own customer's journey by changing the headers across the top, and then answering those questions as, saying, what is the current state of our customer journey? Answering those questions down through each part of that will put you in a position where you'll have a far better understanding as you step into your customer's shoes as to what is going on. Even better if you have some data that backs that up, and you can use that to actually help you fill in these boxes. But for example, if you were there and you're looking at the purchase journey for your customer, what is your customer thinking or feeling at the point of purchase when they've made a decision to buy off you? What actions are they taking? It's really important to understand, like, is it a simple buy? We've all been through the one where you click on the purchase on the website and you go through hoops to actually get out the other side. and finally find that, you know, eventually you get to, you know, put in your credit card number, whereas some people have a really slick process that works really, really well, and that's really become the norm. So that is a much better customer experience for you. What is the touch point, or what are the touch points with the business? Because it's important to understand that, you know, you could find that, you know, you think people are actually buying online, but actually they actually end up coming into a call center or getting rung back to actually complete the sale. What do you want to change about this step? And that really comes down to your own business and what you believe is right for your business and right for your customers. And then, you know, obviously how and why you'll make that change. But, you know, doing this, I like to think that if people step through this with their own internal staff and the people who deal with their customers every day, the insight that they will get by completing this, either over a workshop or over a number of workshops, will really put them in a position where I think they'll have 80% of the benefit of customer experience and customer journey understanding, because they'll start to focus in on what's important for them, and then start to measure the right things. And then once you're doing that, you're actually looking at things through the lens of your customer rather than looking outward. You're more looking inward. So I've included these in the pack in terms of a current state and a future state. So if people afterwards want to have a look at that and want to use those, or alternatively they can go into HubSpot and take them down themselves and just adjust them as they see fit to their business. The final thing I really want to talk to people about today is the concept of touch points and a touch point audit. I think it's very important to understand, as you look at across that end-to-end journey, what are the touch points that are being used. And I would advise people to understand which touch points are being used. But if you can understand what the ranking of them is in terms of volume, if you knew the percentages, or if you can actually rank them as in, most of our business is in store, and we want that actually to change to be less. Starting to understand that is really important. You can see this one, it was a telecoms based one, and you can see that it's a lot from person to person through in-store, inbound and outbound calls, a lot of postal interaction with customers, which is strange, chat on the web, and then an actual app which we added at the end. But when we looked at what our current proportion of users of each of these were by the different stages in the customer journey, and then looked at what we actually wanted, we found some very surprising gaps and changes that we needed to make, including looking at trying to close down some channels over time because they just weren't appropriate to giving good customer journeys. But I think that it's a useful tool for people to use, again, but adjusted to your own business.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is P2P platform to platform or person to person?
Person to person.
Thank you.
Yeah, person to person. Yeah, so typically that's where you've actually got an account manager or somebody face to face with a customer.
Yeah.
Or actually, in the instance I used it there, it was actually those dreaded people who knock on your door to sell you things.
Okay, yes.
Yes. So feet on the street, as they're known in the business, but that's so where a lot of our sales were people knocking on the door, forcing people while they were eating their dinner to make choices. Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, that's where I wanted to get to in terms of talking, and I think what we want to do then is to actually look at us breaking out into groups, or a group. We don't have as many on us as we thought, so I think we should maybe have a conversation